Good evening. Welcome to our concert. We're very excited that you made your way here after a longish day, and I think you will be very well rewarded because the music that is going to be performed tonight is a wonderful caliber of musicians, and I think you'll find it very interesting to hear how our composers and musicians have interpreted the work of MacDonald. So in that spirit, we have some readings, and the first few will kind of set the stage for us, and then we will have, we'll be pairing readings with the response of the composer, the musical response to the readings. So hopefully that will offer a little bit of an interesting commentary. And then we have some of our composers here who are going to give us a bit of an insight into their work. So without further ado, I will invite our first reader up.
If a writer's aim be logical conviction, he must spare no logical pains, not merely to be understood, but to escape being misunderstood, where his object is to move by suggestion, to cause to imagine, and let him assail the soul of his reader as the wind assails an Aeolian harp. If there be music in my reader, I would gladly wake it. Let fairy tale of mine go for a firefly that now flashes, now is dark, but may flash again. Caught in a hand which does not love its kind, it will turn into an insignificant, ugly thing that can neither flash nor fly. The best way with music, I imagine, is not to bring the forces of our intellect to bear upon it, but to be still and let it work on what part of us for whose sake it exists.
I took my leave and went my way through the little garden towards the forest. Some of the garden flowers had wandered into the wood and were growing here and there along the path, but the trees soon became too thick and shadowy for them. I particularly noticed some tall lilies which grew on both sides of the way, with large, dazzlingly white flowers, set off by the universal green. It was now dark enough for me to see that every flower was shining with a light of its own. Indeed, it was by this light that I saw them, an internal, peculiar light, proceeding from each, and not reflected from a common source of light, as in the daytime. This light sufficed only for the plant itself, and was not strong enough to cast any but the faintest shadows around it, or to illuminate any of the neighboring objects with other than the faintest tinge of its own individual hue. From the lilies above mentioned, from the campanulas, from the foxgloves, and every bell-shaped flower, curious little figures shot up their heads, peeped at me, and drew back. They seemed to inhabit them as snails their shells, but I was sure some of them were intruders, and belonged to the gnomes or goblin fairies who inhabit the ground and earthy creeping plants. From the cups of arum lilies, creatures with great heads and grotesque faces shot up like jack-in-the-box and made grimaces at me, or rose slowly and slyly over the edge of the cup and spouted water at me, slipping suddenly back, like those little soldier crabs that inhabit the shells of sea snails. Passing a row of tall thistles, I saw them crowded with little faces, which peeped every one from behind its flower, and drew back as quickly. And I heard them saying to each other, evidently intending me to hear, but the speaker always hiding behind his tuft when I looked in his direction. "Look at him! Look at him! He has begun a story without a beginning, and it will never have any end. Hee hee hee! Look at him!"
He has begun a story without a beginning, and it will never have an end. One of the themes of the prose that I chose to set is actually invasion, not a theme we tend to associate with MacDonald. But there's a lovely line about the world of fairies invades the world of men. And I'm quite sure that in the back of my mind was also an image from Lilith, in which we're told that the narrator's piano sounds so sweet because in the other world there's a rose bush growing right in the place where the piano is. Invasion and also saturation, these two worlds that we experience simultaneously. So as a composer, I played with the idea of two keys simultaneously, but also had to keep it sweet and beautiful, not so intellectual.
My child is lying on my knees. The signs of heaven she reads. My face is all of the heaven she sees, is all of the heaven she needs. And she is well, yea, bathed in bliss, if heaven is in my face. Behind it all is tenderness and truthfulness and grace. I meet her well so earnestly, unchanged in changing mood. My life would go without a sigh to bring her something good. I also am a child, and I am ignorant and weak. I gaze upon the starry sky, and then I must not speak. For all behind the starry sky, behind the world so broad, behind men's hearts and souls doth lie the infinite of God.
If true to her, through troubled sore, I cannot choose but be, thou, who art peace forevermore, art very true to me. If I am low and sinful, bring more love where need is rife. Thou knowest what an awful thing it is to be alive. Hast thou not wisdom to unwrap my waywardness about, in doubting safety on the lap of love that knows no doubt? Lo, Lord, I sit in thy wide space. My child's upon my knee. She looketh up unto my face, and I look up to thee.
For those of you following along with the text, the composer chose to only set three, we'll call them verses. And so there are going to be a couple of quadruplets selectively missing from what you hear.
Wenn ich höre dich mir näh, stimmen in den Blättern da. Wenn ich fühl dich weit und breit, Wasser, das ist Seligkeit. Nun die Sonne liebend scheint, mich mit dir und all vereint. Biene zu den Blumen fliegt, Seel an Lieb sich liebend schmiegt. So mich völlig lieb du hast, Dasein ist nicht eine Last. Wenn ich seh und höre dich, das genügt mir inniglich.
So just a little bit of explanation. This is called the Organ Voice Song, and it's from Within and Without. And I have lots of questions about this text. I'm only about 3 weeks old with it. But the interesting deep dive into it is that he doesn't know German, first of all. So he has no idea what he's singing. His mother taught him this. We don't know if she's alive. And the text is set to this very trudging minor feel, sounding like what you might envision an organ grinder to sound, an organ grinder boy to be playing, like a hurdy-gurdy of some sort. And the text is, when I hear you close to me, voices in the scroll there, when I feel you far and wide, Father, that is bliss, Seligkeit. Now the sun shines lovingly down when you and I are all together. And then he starts talking about the bees flying and all is right with the world. And then he says, so you me completely love and I'm not a burden to you. That's actually part of the text. And then when I see and hear you, that is enough for me. But there's only one little shade of major in that, so it's a very interesting juxtaposition. And I will be hopefully singing it like a little boy.
Seligkeit und die
Then the lady began to sing, and her wheels spun an accompaniment to her song, and the music of the wheel was like the music of an Aeolian harp, blown upon by the wind that bloweth where it listeth. Oh, the sweet sounds of that spinning wheel. Now they were gold, now silver, now grass, now palm trees, now ancient cities, now rubies, now mountain brooks, now peacock's feathers, now clouds, now snowdrops, and now mid-sea islands. But for the voice that sang through it all, about that I have no words to tell. It would make you weep if I were able to tell you what that was like. It was so beautiful and true and lovely. But this is something like the words of its song.
The stars are spinning their threads, and the clouds are the dust that rise, and the suns are weaving them up for the time that the sleeper shall rise. The ocean in music rolls, the gems are turning to eyes, and the trees are gathering souls for the day when the sleepers shall rise. The weepers are learning to smile, and laughter to glean the sighs. Burn and bury the care and guile for the day when the sleepers shall rise. Oh, the dews and the moss and the daisy red, the larks and the glimmers and glows, the lilies and sparrows and daily bread, and the something that nobody knows.
My thoughts are like fireflies, pulsing in moonlight. My heart like a silver cup, filled with red wine. My soul a pale gleaming horizon, whence soon light will flood the gold earth with a torrent divine.
sonnet in response to Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. I see your world in light that shines behind me, lit by a sun whose rays I cannot see. The smallest gleam of light still seems to find me, or find the child who's hiding deep inside me. I see your light reflected in the water, or kindled suddenly in someone's eyes. It shimmers through translucent leaves in summer, or spills from silver veins in leaded skies. It gathers in the candles at our Vespers. It concentrates in tiny drops of dew. At times it sings for joy. At times it whispers. But all the time it calls me back to you. follow you upstream through this dark night, my Saviour, source and spring, my life and light.
Holy midnight of the soul, when stars alone are high, when winds are resting at their goal, and sea waves only sigh. Ambition faints from out the will, asleep sad longing lies. All hope of good, all fear of ill, all need of action dies. Because God is, and claims the life he kindled in thy brain, and thou in him, wrapped far from strife, diest and livest again.
Holy
Hi, y'all.
It feels like we're scared of Steve or something. That's a little weird. Is this on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. So good in here, I can't tell. I'm actually sitting in for Chelle Stearns tonight, and I'm really sad that she can't be here with you three gentlemen and with Amanda, because Chelle and Amanda have done an amazing job of putting together this beautiful evening in an exceedingly short period of time. And I will mention this again later, but all of you musicians, you guys have blessed us so incredibly.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Something that's just blown our minds away. In what, 2 months, Amanda? 1
Less
month?
than that.
Yeah, not even that.
5 weeks?
5
6
weeks.
weeks.
All these musicians had 5 weeks notice for what they have gifted us with this evening. And it's really, it's very beautiful, and it's something we're going to continue with us forever. Some of you who have heard me interview before know that I don't like to go through the usual list of accolades, because you guys are more than your achievements. You're humans. And everybody's got the bios on your phones and on your paper. So I see a spouse laughing down below, so I'm not going to try to not focus on that too much. But you guys have the traditional bios on your phones or even on your programs. And so I'd like you two gentlemen to introduce yourselves to us a little bit through perhaps this question. When Josh Rodriguez was a little boy, JAC Redford was a little boy, what was the magic, what was the music that grew you into, each of you, into becoming the composers that you are today?
So the first names that came to mind were Beethoven and Williams, John Williams. So for me, Beethoven, and I guess I would add Handel, were pretty important. As a teenager, so my family I come from a missionary family. I was born in Argentina. My parents met and married there. My father is from Colombia, and my mother is from Southern Illinois. And so we traveled a lot, and I remember we were in Guatemala. Those were my first memories as a kid. And the reason I say that is because when I was 12 years old, we moved. We left Guatemala, moved to Mexico. That was a huge shift for me, saying goodbye to all my friends and really never seeing them again. And so I turned to music during that time. And even though I'd taken some piano lessons before that, it was during that time that I really dove into music and rediscovered it. And Beethoven was right there for me. And so I spent a lot of time listening to Beethoven recordings, and I just, as someone, I think maybe my mother bought a score of a Beethoven symphony for me, and I remember looking at that, and I couldn't read music very well, but I could tell by listening to the recording and then looking at the music that there was a through line throughout this symphony, and that he was doing something that wasn't just emotionally moving to me, but that it was also something that he was developing. He was unpacking a story of sorts. And that just blew my mind. Then I remember going to my first live concert, a live orchestra and choir. This was in Mexico. It was a performance of Handel's Messiah. And in the middle of that concert, I just thought, this is what I want to do. And I felt like a little voice inside saying, you can do this. And so it wasn't an immediate, suddenly I was composing from then on, but that was part of the journey, a significant part of the journey that led me into music. And then the last part of that is when I was purchased an album, a CD of John Williams' music, and it was a kind of tour of what he had done up until that point, and just fell in love with that. And I thought, wow, so there are living composers who are doing this. So maybe somehow I could contribute to this.
That's great. I've never heard that story before. That's great. Let's see. 3 things, I think. When I was born in 1953. West Side Story came out in 1957. My mother was a singer, and we basically destroyed that LP. We listened to it over and over and over again. Leonard Bernstein and Igor Stravinsky, the Firebird Suite. We had a set of 78s that dropped down one at a time, and then you turned them over. On the last side, there was a Deems Taylor commentary that told the story. So pretty much that's all you need to know about my vocabulary. Leonard Bernstein and Igor Stravinsky. Secondly, I used to play with toy soldiers like everybody, and I also heard scores as I was playing with them. And I thought everybody did. I didn't know that I didn't know that was unusual until later on. But I just heard fully orchestrated music in my head when I was playing with my toys. And then finally, my first really deep aesthetic experience, I was probably about 9 years old, and I was listening to who we now know it's Jeremiah Clark, but we originally thought it was Purcell, Prince of Denmark March. It was a recording with E. Power Biggs at the organ and some brass. And I was just overcome with emotion. I started weeping. I mean, I'm 9 years old, I'm a boy. You know, you're not supposed to do that. My mom understood. I ran upstairs to tell her about it, and she was really sweet and understood that this was an aesthetic experience. And about 10 minutes later, she said, okay, it's time to stop now. But I didn't stop. I kept doing that for the rest of my life. So.
That is beautiful. I feel like I want a little, I was going to move into the MacDonald question, but what shifted your love for both of you into this is my vocation? Not your occupation, but your vocation.
All right. Okay, fair enough. We had a couple of doctors in my family, and as I became a teenager, I thought I should give some thought about how I'm going to make a living. And I've been to my grandfather's office and seen him work. I hung around with my uncle. He was an orthopedic surgeon. So I'm probably going to be a doctor like that. And then the jazz bug bit. I was a trombone player. I got into the jazz ensemble in high school and absolutely just fell for it. I started writing. I never had to learn how to write because I'd learned how to read music in church. And so I just started writing. And it just never was a foreign language to me in that respect. So right at the same time that I was playing, learning the instrument, I was also starting to learn. I wrote my first pieces when I was 14, and then just kept going after that. So that's how it started for me, and I felt it was a vocation. So, I mean, I immediately gave up any thoughts of medicine. Or maybe it's just a different kind of medicine.
I like this idea, it's a different kind of medicine. And it's one the world needs. It's important.
Well, I
for me, so my father was a pastor, and at some point, I thought maybe I would be a pastor as well. But when it came time to make some decisions, I was thinking about this, and I realized, yes, I could become a pastor. There was something interesting about that to me. I liked studying, and I already, as a pastor's kid, I'd been asked to preach some little sermons, at different churches, so I was familiar with this idea of diving into scripture and praying and trying to put something together that could feed people spiritually. But what I realized is that maybe I could do that, but I would always have these tunes going on in my head. And I would probably always wonder, could I have been a composer? And so it felt like something I had to at least try. And in trying, somewhere along the way, I mean, in a sense, it's a calling. But I think one thing that did happen that was interesting is that when I was in that period of indecision, I remember being pretty stressed out. I was 18, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was finishing up high school, and I remember just taking a moment to pray and reading the Psalms, and coming up on that psalm and said, wait on the Lord. And I thought, okay, maybe I don't need to know exactly what's going to happen, how it'll happen, I'll just wait. And later that week, a family friend came to us and said, hey, I just wanted to give you guys a check, a little gift here, so that Josh can go study music if that's what he's interested in doing. And I thought, this is, that's the next step. And so it was a series of events like that cemented it for me in my mind that this is a calling. It's not just something I'm going to try to make some money with. Then again, any musician I would have met would have told me you can't make money, music. So really had to be a calling.
Now's when we switch to the questions that you guys are prepared for. That Chelle has discussed with you in advance. And the first one's very simple. How did you first meet MacDonald?
So when I first met MacDonald was actually through Malcolm Guite, through his Spell in the Library YouTube series. At least that's what I thought up until a few weeks ago, because in talking with my mother, she reminded me that there was a poem of MacDonald's that had been significant to her when she was a young person trying to figure out what she was going to do with her life, and she felt a call to missions. And there's a poem in which MacDonald portrays someone who loves nature, who is from the country, who wants to spend time in the country, and is being called to the city. And that's how my mother felt. She was from a small town in southern Illinois, and she felt called to Latin America, and she was learning Spanish, but she wanted to minister out in the fields, out in nature, out in the small towns. And the opportunities that were opening up for her were all in the cities, and there was a need for her to go to the city. And that's where she didn't want to go. But she mentions this, that she came across this poem in the Streams in the Desert book, and it was December 5th, and sure enough, I went back and yep, there it is. She came across this poem, and this helped her surrender and pursue what God was calling her to do. And it was significant. She spent most of her time in cities, and I guess it came to a point of loving it, or at least loving the call and the purpose beyond the things that she desired. But interestingly, the poem that stood out to me in a video that Malcolm put together where he was exploring and unpacking MacDonald's work was this poem that was about dying in order to live. And that's the one you all just heard. And, when I find a poem that inspires me, it really is like creativity, sparking creativity, and I feel like the music just writes itself. It doesn't always happen that way, but I love it when it does. And that has happened at least on 2 occasions. One was the Malcolm Guite poem that you heard earlier today. That was written in just a couple of hours, and with some edits later in the week. I mean, it just flowed. I had to respond in song to these words and these ideas, and to the substance there. I had to make something in response. And the same thing happened with the MacDonald poem.
I've known my wife since we were both 12 years old, and we were best friends before we were married. And we shared a lot of reading together while we were friends. She was the one who introduced me to Gerard Manley Hopkins, for which I will be forever grateful. But she also introduced me to Princess of the Goblins, and that was my first George MacDonald reading. We had read some Narnia together, and then I read George MacDonald, and I read that and The Princess of Curdy, and then I kind of stopped for a while and only came to Fantastes, in the 2000s. Really. Yeah.
Relatively recently.
Relatively recently, yeah. I just finished Lilith for the first time in February, which completely exploded my brain. But I love it.
It'll In what ways has MacDonald awoken music in you? We've heard some of the music that was awoken in Josh, and we will yet hear yours. But in what ways, how would you put that to words for those of us? You hear your words as well as hearing music.
So I can introduce Stephen one more time.
Yeah.
So for me, I think there are some things that jump out at me whenever I read poetry, and I notice the rhythm in the words. There's a certain pacing in which a poem opens up, and that was something that I loved in MacDonald. The pacing and the sort of opening up itself as this mysterious, beautiful thing. Just as often as it is the things that he's actually describing, right? There's a form and content that comes together there. And the other thing that I would say is that these images were immediately personal and individual, but also seem to have these cosmic implications. And I think that maybe it doesn't belong exclusively to MacDonald, but it's one of the things that great poetry does, great writing, and that's what I gravitated toward. Now, I'm very new to MacDonald at the beginning of the journey, and I'm looking forward to much more of this. But that's how it will be.
Well, Fantastes, I was reading Fantastes when I was writing the commission for this piano work, which you're about to hear. And I often will title a work about a third of the way or midway through the writing of the piece, because I don't really know what the piece is fully. I haven't observed it long enough or been acquainted with it long enough. Pieces are sometimes like dating. You got to find out what the piece likes to eat, what kind of yeah, it's dynamic for sure. And so I was about midway through writing this piece, and I've been reading Fantastes, and I thought, I think I'll just title it Fantastes. And that was kind of convenient because the piece was supposed to be a fantasia. And the musical form of a fantasia is different than some of the set forms in music, like a rondo or a sonata allegro form. A fantasia is sort of improvisational. It unfolds in different episodes. It doesn't feel the need to have to return or do the same sorts of formal things that, say, a song would or a symphony. So it seemed like kind of the right thing to call this. Only later did I discover how much the book had led into the music. When you listen to the opening bars of the music, cast your mind back to the opening of Fantastes, the scene in the room where the secretary is located, and the young man who's just turned 21 goes in to fulfill his legacy. The cabinet, the darkness, it says the shadows cling bat-like to the walls in that room. Just think of that when you hear the opening bars of this music, and you'll see how Fantastes has a book led into Fantastes, the piece of music. Later on, you'll hear the sounds of a waltz, which to my mind now sounds very much like what the dancers were dancing to in Fairy Palace later on. So there are things, it's not really underscored, it's more of an atmosphere. It's an atmosphere of the book that's being captured, and even the unfolding of the theme, the principal theme, happens not in a formal way like music often does. With the song, you have verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. It doesn't do that in this piece. But this is more improvisatory, but you'll hear that theme moving through like different scenes, different experiences, and that's the way the piece is built. And that too, just the overall trajectory of the music, was a lot like the way the novel works, the way that it unfolds. So I hope you can hear that when you listen to the piece. I want to introduce you to our pianist, Stephen Ewell. Remind you, at the beginning of Fantastes, there's a quote from the Purple Island: Fantastes from their fount, all shapes deriving, in new habiliments can quickly diet. That's exactly what the theme does in this piece. It takes on new habiliments quickly.
This is the last question. And maybe before I ask the last question, I'm just going to suggest, Amanda, do we have a particular closure, or should we just let the music be our closure? I like that, because this is a beautiful piece of music that we're going to hear. And so I'm going to ask this last question, let it lead into the music, and then when Stephen is done, just rest with the music for a bit and maybe quietly leave when you leave, and then you can be noisy outside when you look at the art center. Okay? Last question is, can you reflect a little bit on MacDonald's musicality? I mean, you've sort of hinted at that a little bit already, Jack. But MacDonald, throughout his entire corpus, is exceedingly musical. It's not just that he loves music. And it's not just that he mentions, like we heard before, Grieg's Wedding March in the piano and the roses. Or there's lots of pulling in of Handel, Bach, and even Purcell, Palestrina at one point in time. But his language itself, the phrases of it, he's just filled with musicality.
Yeah, he uses music as a metaphor in many different ways. He refers often to melody, harmony, song, the features of music. He refers to that to use as a metaphor for the experiences of the characters. So when he's trying to describe what the characters are experiencing, he's using music to describe that, or to allude. Probably it's a better thing, because it's an illusion or a metaphor, truly. There's a couple of wonderful, I didn't set MacDonald, so Josh did. Maybe he should comment about musicality from that standpoint.
Well, the only thing that I would add maybe to what I've already said is that there is something about music that is so mysterious. There's so much we can learn about it, and yet we don't really know, still don't know what it is. And so there's something about that that's woven into a story, just is a gateway to possibilities.
I'd just like to read a couple of short sections from Fantastes that are the way that MacDonald and music come together for me. When he first comes upon the fairy palace, we read this. At the moment, some strange melodious bird took up its song and sang, not an ordinary bird song with constant repetitions of the same melody, but what sounded like a continuous strain in which one thought was expressed, deepening in intensity as evolved in progress. It sounded like a welcome already overshadowed with the coming farewell. It sounded like a welcome already overshadowed with the coming farewell. As in all sweetest music, a tinge of sadness was in every note. Nor do we know how much of the pleasures, even of life, we owe to the intermingled sorrows. Joy cannot unfold the deepest truths, although deepest truth must be deepest joy. Cometh the white-robed sorrow, stooping and wan, and flingeth wide the doors she may not enter. Almost we linger with sorrow for very love. And then finally, he's been in the palace for a while, and he makes this observation. It seemed to me strange that all this time I had heard no music in the fairy palace. I was convinced that there must be music in it, but that my sense was as yet too gross to receive the influence of those mysterious motions that beget sound. Sometimes I felt sure, from the way the few figures of which I got such transitory glimpses passed me, glided into vacancy before me, that they were moving to the law of music. And in fact, several times I fancied for a moment that I heard a few wondrous notes coming I knew not whence. But they did not last long enough to convince me that I had heard them with a bodily sense. Such as they were, however, they took strange liberties with me, causing me to burst suddenly into tears, of which there was no presence to make me ashamed, or casting me into a kind of trance of speechless delight, which, passing as suddenly, left me faint and longing for more. Amen?
Thank you all three.